How's it going, Diablo friends? Today I'm excited to bring you my new Chain Lightning Firebolt Eruption build. This build is a Chain Lightning base and it takes full advantage of Chain Lightning damage, Ball Lightning damage and also burst damage of the X'Fals Corroded Signet ring. The X'Fals is really nice because if you pair it with the Firebolt enchantment and the high attack speed of Chain Lightnings and the way that dots and lucky hit chance of dots are stacking, you actually get an enormous amount of eruption explosions out of this. And these explosions deal up to like 3 million damage each. You have permanent uptime on unstable currents, and the nature of this build with using the Ball Lightning enchant and the explosion damage, it also clears a lot of mobs off screen before you can even see them. I'm not gonna say that it's better than Ball Lightning, it's definitely not. Like pure Ball Lightning is pretty much the strongest build you can play right now, and I'm not gonna argue against that. But keep in mind, there might be nerfs to Ball Lightning coming, which might make Chain Lightning builds strongest Sorcerer's builds again. Not saying that it's gonna happen or it's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna speculate on Blizzard's patch behavior. But yeah, with this build you can do Uber Lilith, you can do Uber Duriel, you can do tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons within like 2 minutes if you like to. Nightmare Dungeons bosses go really fast. They don't go as fast as with a pure Ball Lightning build, but still, I guess it's fair to say they are still going fast enough. And the couple of seconds you will be faster with a pure Ball Lightning won't really matter at all. So before we get into the actual build guide, the skill tree and everything, let me just explain real quick here again how the build works. We are using Chain Lightning mainly, and we are using the recharging aspect to basically give us infinite mana. We are not using any other mana regeneration mechanics here. Our Chain Lightning, first of all, does a lot of damage, but is also our main lucky hit applicator. And with lucky hit, we do use the Ball Lightning enchant, which triggers quite often. You can see there's static Ball Lightnings pretty much everywhere, on and off screen. And also we use the Firebolt enchantment to first of all take advantage of our burning synergy, such as Devouring Blaze, Flame Feeder Glyph, and some Paragon nodes obviously, which give bonus damage and damage reduction to burning. But also we use the X'Fals Corroded Signet ring here. As I already said, the Firebolt enchantment lucky hit chance is stacking. Since we have a very high attack speed, we will apply a lot of Firebolt enchantments stacking on each other, and this will trigger the X'Fals explosions quite a lot. Like if you look at the gameplay in the background, you will see the fire explosions pretty much going off all the time. Also, since this is a lightning build, we have a very tanky base build. Since this is just the nature of lightning builds that they are pretty much tanky, we have a permanent stun on everything. We are not using any offensive unique items other than Asus boots, so we can get all our defenses and defensive legendary aspects, which makes us very tanky. And as our Season 2 mechanics here, we use specific Vampiric Powers, so we are using the Accursed Touch to apply the curse on all enemies around. Then we use the Prey on the Weak to make them all vulnerable, so we don't need to have any other specific vulnerable mechanics here, and we can take full advantage of the damage modification. And then we take the Ravenous Vampiric Power combined with a very high movement speed, which pretty much gives us permanent attack speed together with the accelerating aspect on our gloves. If you feel like you don't even need the accelerating aspect, you can also put another offensive aspect on your gloves if you want, and then just use, for example, the Heady Assault Elixir for another 20% attack speed, and you're still gonna sit at max attack speed just fine. That's it for the short introduction, so let's see how we melt on this boss here real quick, and then let's go into the detailed guide sections after this. And remember, you will find all the links to the specific sections of this guide in the description down below. You will find the link to the planner, and also we will find links to my other guides at the very end of the description. Also, at the end of this video, I'm gonna leave you like 2 or 3 nightmare dungeons, and I leave you Uber Lilith and Uber Duriel footage. So now let's get into the sections of the guide. Alright, let's get into the skill tree. So, since we used the Firebolt enchantment, we just put 2 points into Firebolt to be able to take the enchantment and get into core skills. Then in core skills, we basically max out Chain Lightning with Enhanced Chain Lightning and Greater Chain Lightning. This will greatly boost the damage of Chain Lightning, and we don't need the crackling energy from destructive chain lightning in this build because we can get it from other talents we're gonna see later. Then we put 1 point into devastation, 3 points into elemental dominance. We're going to be above 50 mana pretty much all the time, so this is a free 9% damage increase. Then we put 1 point into Flame Shield, 1 point into Teleport, 1 point into Enhanced Teleport, and 1 point into Shimmering Teleport. We will have a lot of uptime on Shimmering Teleport because we are using Overflowing Energy, and that will reduce our Shock skill cooldown, so we can pretty much use this Teleport here all the time. Then we put 1 point into Ice Armor, and 1 point into Elemental Attunement, 3 points into Glass Cannon, pretty much like always. Then we go with 3 points into Precision Magic, 1 point into Align the Elements, 3 points into Mana Shield, 3 points into Protection. These defensives are just way too good to leave them out. And we need to have a barrier up all the time for our offensive aspects, so Protection will take care of that just fine. We use 1 point into Lightning Spare, 1 point into Enhanced Lightning Spare, and 1 point into Invoked Lightning Spare, so our Lightning Spares can stun enemies on and off screen for us. Then we put 1 point into Inner Flames and 3 points into Devouring Blaze. It's always great if you have +3 or +2 Devouring Blaze on your amulet. That's going to boost your damage significantly. Then we choose max points into Ball Lightning. We put 1 point into Enhanced Ball Lightning and 1 point into Wizard's Ball Lightning. This is pretty much our main crackling energy generator. We don't really need anything more than this. We put 1 point into Static Discharge just to get some little bit extra crackling energy. If you struggle with mana regeneration, you can always take some points out of somewhere else and go into Invigorating Conduit, for example, to get some more mana regeneration. Then we put 1 point into Unstable Currents, 1 point Prime Unstable Currents, and 1 point Supreme Unstable Currents. This is our main skill here. We want to have this up all the time, so obviously we choose it and max it. 1 point into Causing Currents, 3 point into Electrocution for the damage reduction, and 3 points into Convulsions here for the stun on lucky hit. This is going to trigger quite a bit as well. We're not using Conduction here because we already have way more than enough Critical Strike and movement speed right here. Again, this is also probably kind of personal preference. Like if you want to use Conduction, you can probably do that as well. And then last but not least, we use Overflowing Energy to get our cooldowns reduced greatly. So again, this works pretty much on our ultimate cooldown, and it also works on our teleport cooldown. And for teleport, it's actually quite nice because we get the damage reduction on teleport, and we can pretty much use this all the time without using any fancy stuff like Oculus or anything else. If you do like Uber bosses or whatever, you pretty much just switch to Burst Mastery for some extra damage, since you're not going to use the Overflowing Energy anyway. Okay, here's our skill build. So we use Unstable Currents. We want to have as much cooldown reduction as possible. When we pop Unstable Currents, this is not only going to give us 25% extra attack speed, but also cast all these nice little shock skills, including Ball Lightnings and Chain Lightnings, which are going to do a lot of damage. Then the second skill spot here is pretty much optional. I use Lightning Spare. You can also use Frost Nova if you like. You could probably use Hydra if you really want to do it. I just don't really have a different skill I would use here, so that's why I'm using Lightning Spare, because I can just throw out the Lightning Spare before I engage a pack of mobs, and that is then already going to be stunned when I arrive there, if, for instance, I don't have Unstable Currents up. Teleport gives us 30% damage decrease if we teleport for 3 seconds. Again, we try to have this up pretty much all the time. We use Flame Shield for obvious reasons. Chain Lightning is our main damage spell, so this is also going to do a lot of damage, but also is our main applicator for Lucky Hit. So all the Lucky Hit effects we use in this build are based on the Chain Lightning pretty much. And we use Ice Armor for a little bit more survivability. It's always nice to have Ice Armor up and running. We use the Ball Lightning enchant, and I'm not gonna lie, a lot of damage is coming from this. This is probably gonna do more damage than Chain Lightning, or pretty much equal at least, maybe more. But it's just way too good to just not use it. Like, you could try to use something different here, but I just feel like Ball Lightning enchant works like best with this. And then we use the Firebolt enchantment, as this is a core ability of this build. First of all, it allows us to get the Burning Synergy, but also this triggers the X'Fals fire explosions all the time, and that's going to be a significant chunk of our damage here. Okay, let's go through legendary aspects and unique items. Let's start with the offensive aspects. So we use the aspect of the Unbroken Tether to give our Chain Lightning additional bounces. I would really like to play without this, or at least don't put this on the amulet, but you just need it to make the build work. It's not going to work without. It just gives you so much more mana regeneration, it procs so much more lucky hit. The damage is not really matter, so it doesn't really do a lot of extra damage just because the Chain Lightning has more bounces, yet it does more damage, but you know, it's not like it's doing extreme amounts of extra damage. No, it's doing a little bit of extra damage, but mainly this is for mana regeneration and lucky hit application. Then we are using the recharging aspect here. This is for our mana regeneration. You should try to have 2.5 or 3. Like anything 2 and below is not gonna be great. Then we use the Storm Swirl aspect. This is the strongest offensive aspect for Sorcerers in my mind. This just gives you a permanent 30% damage increase. Enemies are always going to be vulnerable, and we're always going to have a barrier, so this is pretty much without any conditions. Then we use the Conceited aspect, pretty much the same as the Storm Swirl, just a little bit lower. We always have a barrier up, so this is also a permanent damage increase. And then we use the Accelerating aspect here. If you have, for example, 15% attack speed on your gloves, you can probably use a different offensive aspect, like Elementalist, for example, or maybe the Elementalist, how is it called? The aspect of the elements, I guess, the new one, which also gives you a little bit more multiplicative damage. But you can also go with the Accelerating aspect here. And then we use Asus as our unique boots. This is pretty much just to boost our crit chance. The mana cost reduction is nice, but this is giving you like around 30-35% crit chance. Most important here really is the stat that it evade grants 75% movement speed for 3 seconds, because this is always going to put you at 200% movement speed, and that is going to give you then the 30% plus crit chance, but also it gives you the 60% plus attack speed from the Ravenous Vampiric Power. And as for our defensive aspects, we use the Ever-Living aspect. This is pretty much, again, a 25% damage decrease without any conditions, because enemies are always going to be vulnerable. We use the aspect of Disobedience for armor. This is most importantly to reach your armor cap. And then we use the Exploiters aspect here. You could also use the Snow Veiled aspect instead. I just like the little bit of extra crowd control duration, and when enemies are really running out of crowd control and get unstoppable, I get a nice damage multiplicator here. So I have kind of a little bit of an offensive aspect for a defensive gear piece. But you could also get the Snow Veiled aspect for some extra armor on ice armor. It's also nice. It's kind of a personal preference here. And then last but not least, let's go over the X'Fals Corroded Signet here again. Like, this is a really nice ring. First of all, it has nice base stats. All stats is a really great stat on a ring. Damage over time doesn't really matter at all, but let's face it, the damage stats on the rings don't matter anyway. Lucky hit chance would be nice to have a better roll, but it's still a nice stat. Cooldown reduction would be nice to have a better roll, but it's still a nice stat. And the lucky hit effect is what is most important here. This is going to crit for like 2 to 3 millions depending on the situation and your current buffs, but this really does a lot of damage here. And stat priorities. For our helm, we want to go for total armor as our most important stat, followed by cooldown reduction, followed by crowd control duration, and then you can, for example, have a resistance stat. So you need 1 resistance stat on one of your armor pieces pretty much. You can also have 2, which is even better. If you don't have a resistance stat, you can, for example, have lucky hit here, or pretty much any other stat. You don't need maximum mana. I have main stat, which is also right, I guess. On our armor, we want to have, again, total armor, most important. Damage reduction stats, maximum life, maybe a resistance stat. You see where I'm going here. On our gloves, you want to have critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, ranks of chain lightning, and you can either have resource restoration here, or you could also add attack speed. If you have attack speed on here, you can probably skip the accelerating aspect. But having critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, attack speed, and +4 chain lightning is, well, it's a pretty good piece if you have that. Let's just say it like that. On our armor, again, we want to have total armor, most important stat. Then we want to have damage reduction stats, ranks of ball lightning, and you can have max life or a resistance stat here, something defensive which fits your overall gear set. Then we have the Asus boots. Pretty much most important stats here is movement speed and the critical strike chance increased percentage. High roll of mana cost reduction obviously is nice if you can get it. On our weapon, we want to have all stats, intelligence, and ideally damage to burning, and for example damage to close enemies is good, damage to distant is good, any unconditional damage stat pretty much. Then on our focus, you want critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, you want cooldown reduction, and you probably want to have mana cost on hit or main stat. Barrier generation is pretty much useless. I don't think you need a lot of mana cost reduction in this build. I still have all these stats on my items since they're not perfect, but mana cost reduction shouldn't be very important in this build. Then on our ring, you want to have critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, you want to have probably max life, and resource generation is a nice stat as well here, I guess. Then we have the X'Fals. Well, you can't do anything about the stats. As I already said, all stats on it is pretty nice. My lucky hit chance and cooldown reduction are pretty bad. So probably at some point I want to farm some better ones here. And on your amulet, ideally you want intelligence percent, movement speed, mastery skills, and devouring blaze. So this is pretty much almost the perfect piece. You could also have something different instead of intelligence, like cooldown reduction, or I guess you can have defensive skills that will give you, for example, some extra skill points in your skill tree you can use then for example, Conjuration Mastery, which you're not using. But I guess this piece here is the optimal one you can get. So for our gems then, you want to have skulls. Pretty much, if you have one resistance stat on your helmet, armor, and gloves, you want to have the missing resistance in here. If you can get 2 resistance stats, you can actually put another skull in here, and that will really get you to the armor cap. Like, I have like 10k armor, that's really nice. You can probably get away with like 9.5, but it really helps to max out these armor stats here. And remember, if you're looking for the optimal stats, just check the planner in the description down below. You will find all optimal stats for this build in the planner link. Okay, let's go through the Vampiric Powers. Here, again, we have like 3 mandatory Vampiric Powers and the other ones are optional. So, mandatory Vampiric Powers is definitely a Cursed Touch. This is going to make our Ghost deal more damage, and it's going to apply our Vulnerable. So this is pretty much, you have to use it, there's no way around it. Then we use the Prey on the Weak, because together with the Cursed Touch, this is going to make all enemies vulnerable who have a Vampiric Curse, and all enemies have a Vampiric Curse all the time. On top of this, it also gives us a 16% damage increase to vulnerable enemies. And then we use the Ravenous here. This gives us a current bonus of 58% attack speed for our movement speed bonus. Later, when you are in combat situation, you get another 9% movement speed from talents, and whenever you evade, you get 75% movement speed. So this is pretty much going to elevate you to maximum attack speed all the time. Then we have our 2 optional glyphs. The first one here is the Anticipation. This gives you 20% cooldown reduction and more damage on ultimate skills. Honestly, I have no idea if this works on Unstable Current or not. If anybody knows, well, yes, good for you. It's just for the 20% decreased cooldown here. If you have a lot of cooldown reduction on your gear, you probably don't need this. You can probably go for a different glyph, like 45 for example. And our second optional glyph, I use Undying for the Life Leech on casting skills. This is also just personal preference. Like, you can also get Resilience for more damage reduction. It's a nice option. You can definitely get the Sanguine Embrace for the Fortify. This gives you another 8% critical strike chance. It's also a very nice glyph. This is pretty much optional and up to you. You can pretty much run however you like best. Let's go through the Paragon board. So for the Paragon board, again, I decided to not use any conditional damage like Control Glyph or anything like that, because I just feel like this is reducing your boss damage. And in general, I just do not recommend to use any conditional damage stats which are not up 100% of the time. They are not significantly better than the unconditional glyphs, and you're just gonna have so much of a better time if you do not use these. So let's just go through the Paragon here. We use the non-physical damage nodes here, and then we put in the Elementalist glyph here. We mainly focus on multiplicative damage bonuses for our glyphs. That is the most important. We do not really care so much about the additive. The multiplicative here is the most important. Unfortunately, we don't have any cold damage in this build, but still, this is going to give us a 10% multiplicative damage modifier, and that is still very good. Moving over to the next board, this is the Enchantment Master board. We pick up the non-physical damage and the resistance nodes here, and then we put in our Tactician Glyph. Tactician Glyph, again, 10% increased damage after casting a defensive skill, so this is pretty much going to have a 100% uptime. And it's just another damage multiplier we chose. And also we choose the non-physical damage and damage to elite nodes here. Then we move over to our next board, that is the Keysless Conduit board. We are going to pick up all these nice Hunter Killer damage to elite nodes here. And then we're going to pick up the Destruction Glyph here with the maximum of 49 dexterity. This is again going to give us 12% multiplicative damage. And the critical strike damage is 194% additive. This is really nice since we have almost 100% critical strike chance in this build. We pick up the lightning damage here and the lightning resistance here, and then move over to the next board. That is going to be the Burning Instinct board. Since we use the Fireball enchant, we can take advantage of Burning Synergy. So what we're doing here is we take the burning and damage reduction to burning, more burning damage, and here we take the armor and damage reduction from elite nodes. This cluster is not necessary. If you feel like you don't need it, you can definitely get something else for these. I just feel like the extra armor and damage reduction is really nice to get if you're already on this board. And as our glyph, we use the Flame Feeder glyph here. This is just an 87% additive, but again, we have another 10% multiplicative damage here, which does not have any conditions. Moving over to the next board, this is going to be the Frigid Fate board. We pretty much just used this build for our glyph. We put in the Imbiber glyph here with 44 willpower. This is pretty much, I would say, our weakest glyph, but we simply run out of multiplicative damage. So this just gives us like an 87% damage increase, and we pick up the vulnerable damage nodes here, and we pick up the cold resistance nodes here. And then we move over to the next board. That is going to be the Searing Heat board. This one, again, is just for the glyph. We put in the Exploit glyph with 39 dexterity. Again, you don't have to take the big dexterity boards for this glyph, since the additive damage doesn't really matter at all. All we care about, again, is the 10% multiplicative damage here. And we pick up the Fire Resistance node. You don't need the extra 10%, doesn't really matter. And then we go to our last board. This is going to be the Static Surge board. This, again, we just use for the glyph here. And our glyph here is the Charge glyph. Again, 105% Crackling Energy does exactly nothing. Crackling Energy literally does no damage. But this one gives us another 15% multiplicative damage increase. We pick up the resistance node here, and that is pretty much it for our Paragon board. So if you followed it closely, we have 6 glyphs which give multiplicative damage here, and that is pretty much the most optimized Paragon board for multiplicative damage you can get. And that's going to be it for this guide. I hope you find it useful. I'm gonna leave you 2 Nightmare Dungeons now, and I'm gonna leave you Uber Lilith and Uber Duriel as well. Make sure to directly skip to the sections you want to, like if you want, in the description down below. I will also stream this build live in the next following days every evening, so just tune in if you want to see the build in real live action. And that's it for me, and I hope you find the video useful, and thank you so much for watching, and I see you next time.
I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I need time to prepare. I need time to prepare. I'm not ready yet. I need time to prepare. I need time to I need time to prepare. I'm not ready yet. I need time. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I need time to prepare. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. ready yet. I'm not ready yet.